Remember the first bonus episode when I interviewed Danny Treweek from Single Minded Ministry? Yeah, good times. Anyway, if you recall, her ministry has a podcast called Single Minded Stories, and yours truly was recently on it. It was my first time being interviewed on a podcast instead of being the interviewer, and I must say it's quite different. But I had a great time, and it was a chance to share a little more about myself and my own history in a way that I haven't really done on this show. So today, I'm going to play that interview for you. If you like what you hear, then go check out the Single Minded Stories podcast for more like it. As always, links are in the show notes. Okay, here's the episode. Hey everyone, my name is Kevin, and my single-minded story is intentional. And I really like that feeling of coming into somebody's house and being a part of it, of not dividing it, not being just one person's friend, but really just being a friend to both people. It's been years and years of just discontentment and, watching all my friends get married and find people, and it just seems to come so easy to everybody else.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Lee, and welcome to another episode of Single Minded Stories brought to you by Single Minded. We're a podcast about singleness, but we're for everyone. And each episode, we get to chat with a different single Christian guest about their single-minded story as they share with us the joys, challenges, opportunities, growth that's been part of their singleness story, and most importantly, part of their life with Jesus. Today, I have with me Kevin. Thanks for coming on and being willing to share your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So at the top of the episode, you told us that your story is intentional. I'm sure that you have the same level of deliberate intentionality on why you picked that word, and we'll hear more about that. But for the moment, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very small town in Arkansas. I always tell people from Arkansas don't know where this is from. We got on the GPS like 20 years ago, and I came to faith as a sophomore in high school, so a little bit later than a lot of people that I know. It's funny how I kind of got lured into that. I had stopped going to church maybe at like 13. My mother had back problems, and I didn't really want to go, so we didn't go. But I got really interested in music, and I was teaching myself to play keyboard. And I remember very clearly asking God one night, kind of in the way you do when, you don't really believe him, but he's like that genie that you just kind of come to every once in a while when you want something. And I said, God, if you'd give me somebody to play music with, because I'm in Arkansas, nobody does that. If you give me somebody to play music with, start a band with, I'll do Christian rock. And about a week later, one of the ladies from our old church found us in the grocery store. She goes, "Hey, we got a new pastor, and he has a son who's, about 2 years younger than you, and he plays guitar." And so arranged to meet him, and we became best friends and started a band. And that's what I did during my entire rest of my high school. And obviously that's how Christ drew me to himself. I was around enough.
What was the name of your band?
Oh gosh, it was so bad. Unity of the Cross was what we called ourselves.
Unity of the Cross.
Unity of the Cross.
Wow.
So very much leaning hard on the, united in Christ part. But boy, we thought we were hot stuff. But, we recorded two albums, an album and an EP, something like that in high school. So, I mean, we got to do a lot of cool stuff.
Wow.
So did that, those were my close friends, were my bandmates for 3 years. And then, I graduated and moved to Nashville, and went to Belmont University because they were one of the few places that had an audio engineering degree. And I had recorded 2 albums, and I wanted to keep doing that with music, recording people playing music. So did that for 4 years and got very tired of being in the school's basement all night, every night, and decided that maybe recording music wasn't the most fun thing to do. So I got a chance to work with editing and producing audiobooks right out of college, and I've been doing that ever since. And then these days, mostly I do that, and podcasts are my other kind of main gigs. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And so being part of that band was your first introduction to kind of church life after you walked away.
Yeah, I mean, I went to VBS and did all that kind of stuff, but we weren't very involved in the church. I think my mom maybe did the bulletin every once in a while, but you also have to understand the church I grew up in, most people were over 50 years old. Even when I went back as a teenager, there were like maybe 5 to 10 teenagers, and like there were 50 people in the church, and everybody else was like over 50 years old. So it was definitely an older, more traditional. We sang the hymns in the original keys kind of
Mm,
church.
mm. Yeah, the keys that Jesus himself gave to the church
Right,
to
right.
sing,
That
right?
only the older ladies could hit, and we're all trying to learn how to harmonize. So
Yeah, that's right. So at what point did the faith actually become serious for you in terms of something that you're like, I
hmm.
want to follow Jesus with my life?
Pretty quickly, honestly, and I don't know if that's because I fell so hard in with Jonathan, my friend, or if it's because I really just got it really quickly. I always believed in God, but I think once I kind of got my head around it a bit more, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me. I can't really see this being in any other way. And I don't really remember the particular day, but I just know through prayer and having conversations about Jesus with his family. There was just a point where I was just like, "Yep, this is my Lord now." And I did get pretty serious about it in college, though. I think that's when I truly understood everything. Truly, that's
Mhm.
definitely when I became reformed. So it was a whole different thing there. But there was a Bible study that I became a part of in college that was student led and very involved, and had about as many people as my church actually
Wow.
originally. So about 50 of us getting in a circle in the student lounge, and but they're the ones who I think really made me fall in love with God's word in a way that I hadn't before. And so I think I knew Jesus from 15. I think I really understood and truly loved Jesus as much as I do now when I was in college.
Mm, that's wonderful. Well, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your story of singleness in particular?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I'm 32 and I haven't actually dated anyone since before college. I think the most serious girlfriend I had was when I was a junior in high school, and we dated for like half a year. So not a lot of experience there. And when I got involved with the Bible study at Belmont, I actually had a bunch of friends, but it was the first time I had a lot of female friends. And so that kind of was, a time for me figuring out how to talk to girls. I wasn't super great at that in high school. And, but I did spend most of college kind of smitten with one girl, and she really just wanted to be friends. And so I think I missed a lot of opportunities because I was hyper focused and not really looking around. I use the word intentional here, not to say that I wanted to be, and I was intentionally single this long. That's absolutely not why I use that word. I've always been open to marriage. I'm a bit of a chicken when it comes to actually talking to girls sometimes, but I try to take the opportunities that are given to me to interact with new people. And, but it's just obvious that the Lord hasn't had that for me yet. It's been years and years of just discontentment and, watching all my friends get married, and find people. And it just seems to come so easy to everybody else. And I was really discontent in that for a while. I'm begging God during school, just please give me somebody. I felt like things would just be okay if I could find someone. But the cool thing about watching all your friends get married is if they're really honest with you, it kind of disillusions you in a healthy way to what marriage actually is. And I think very quickly I realized, oh, I might not actually be ready for this after all. This might be a good thing that the Lord has waited this long in my life. I think I had some maturing to do. And I think coming to realize that marriage is not something that's going to solve all my problems. In fact, it's actually inviting me into extreme sacrifice, extreme selflessness if you're doing it right. So, yeah, I think it's very much prudence on the Lord, wisdom from the Lord to keep me single as long as I've been single. I feel like I'm a lot more ready for it now. Maybe not as ready as I need to be. We'll see. But having all those friends in my life has really been a huge kindness. The Lord obviously hasn't asked me to do this alone. I've had more than enough people.
Yeah, I remember the first time I walked out of counseling a married couple and thinking to myself, it's not that marriage is worse. I actually think marriage in some ways was more beautiful, seeing them press through those difficulties. But at the same time, it gave a more nuanced, I think, more accurate picture of what the gift of marriage is. And it also made the gift of singleness sweeter. I started noticing the advantages that were in the gift of singleness that I just didn't notice because it was part of the furniture of my life.
Right,
Right.
right. Well, and don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I want a family and kids, but like sometimes when you're over at your friend's house and their kid is just throwing a fit, it's kind of nice to be the one who gets to go home. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's one of your pastors, Sam, that said, you babysit a child and you walk out and you realize the gift of singleness is a gift for a reason.
right.
Right. In light of that, what have been some of the challenges and complexities that came with this gift of singleness? And what does faithfulness look like in those situations for you?
Yeah. Well, as all my friends started getting married, the thing I realized very quickly is that I didn't know how to hang out with couples. And that that would be something I would need to learn if I wanted to maintain a lot of the friendships that I had. And it wasn't because my friends were just like, oh, my friends' wives weren't like, you can't go hang out with him, without me. Like they absolutely were cool with that. But I just realized that like it wasn't going to be enough to maintain what we would call a close friendship if I didn't learn how to actually enter into his house and be a part of that, as opposed to taking him away all the time. I call it, dividing a house in some ways. Like if I'm the one coming in all the time, and the wife isn't involved, she sees me as, oh, your friend Kevin is here, I'm going to go out with the girls, or I'm going to go make dinner or take a bath or something like that, versus, oh, Kevin's here, cool, what are we doing? And I really like that feeling of coming into somebody's house and being a part of it, of not dividing it, not being just one person's friend, but really just being a friend to both people. And I found that's really made my friendships with, my same gender friends very strong, to be close to their wives as well. It's a more rounded friendship. And so I said I had to learn how to do that really quickly. And because I realized, when my best friend got married, I went up to Oklahoma and met his wife as soon as I possibly could. And we just ran errands together and did stuff while he was at work, because I realized, if my best friend has become one flesh with someone I don't know, I really kind of only know half my friend at that point, and it feels kind of like a lie calling him my best friend. And so yeah, I started, trying to be really intentional with that, having couples over, meeting them out for dinner. The majority of the hangouts that we do, even to this day, is hangouts with me coming to their house. That just tends to be the easier rhythm when you're the flexible one and they're the ones with restraints. And it was definitely the only way I could spend time with people who had kids on a regular basis, because, they're all slaves to the almighty bedtime. So, yeah, so it has been a sacrifice for sure, but it's a lot of drive time. It's a lot of, having to kind of bend to somebody else's rules, but it has been so worth it. And, they meet me halfway. It's give and take. Like, sometimes I show up and my friends cook for me, which is really awesome. Sometimes I grab them food. I submit myself to their routines, and they make me a part of their family, which is a really sweet thing. So yeah, I've been welcomed into a lot of families, and that is something I don't know if everybody has, that I really hope more people get.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk more about community in a little bit, but I do think that when you are in a local church that is intentional about caring for one another and loving the members of the church well, what happens is that the advantages that you have become opportunities to serve others, right?
Yeah.
So even what you're saying about flexibility, it's a joy to be able to leverage that to serve other people. It's still hard. It's fine to admit that, but it's a joyous sacrifice, right? For caring for other people that are in the Lord's family.
This podcast is a ministry of the Single Minded Ministry. Here at Single Minded, we develop faithful resources about singleness that equip Christians, encourage Christian communities, and shape Christian culture. We'd love you to be part of that. So check out our free resource library and upcoming events, subscribe to our podcast, join our mailing list, and spread the word about Single Minded. You can also help make our Single Minded vision a reality by partnering with us financially. Our ministry relies on the generous financial support of our community. So to make a regular or one-off financial gift, visit www.singleminded.community/give.
We've talked about some of the challenges and complexities. What are some of the ways that God has blessed you and others in your singleness?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I enter into a lot of the lives of my friends. I do life with them more so than hang out with them, which means, errands and things like that while we hang out. And they've been really open enough to give me a window into what marriage and parenthood looks like. And when I decided to start engaging more with the family unit instead of just one person I knew, I made the very conscious, some would say intentional, decision to pay attention to kind of all the details of what I was seeing, because I do want marriage. I do want a family of my own someday, but it's not an option right now, and I can't control that. So what I realized is, well, God has placed tons of married people right in front of me, and they want to spend time with me. So I thought it would be kind of foolish for me not to take notes while I was watching all of that, because if my time ever does come, I will enter it a lot wiser and tempered than I would have otherwise. And so that just felt like the calling on my life at that point, is take notes, learn what you can from them, bless them in the ways that you can. And, I've gotten to be Uncle Kevin to a lot of little ones as they're getting older, and that's been really fun. getting to be around and, being part of the, bedtime routine of reading books and bottles and all that kind of stuff, babysitting them when parents fall ill because they don't have family in town or things like that. And, I'm a single dude who's good with kids and enjoys their company. That's a hard place to be sometimes with culture being what it is, but they've really trusted me and been open, and that has meant a lot. And in ways I've tried to bless others, I went and asked them, a couple of friends, because I always feel weird about being like, I'm so good at this, or I bless people like this. But a few of my friends told me that they would say probably consistent intentionality has been one of my giftings. Especially with my closest friends, I do these things I call standing plans. I don't know if I really coined that. It may have just come from somewhere else. I'm sorry if I misattributed it, but I think I coined it. I'm not sure. But yeah, basically just, me and my closest friends, we hang out every Saturday night. That's a night that, like, unless we say otherwise, we're assuming that's going to happen. We generally don't talk about it until we're like texting 3 hours before to see what we're going to eat that night. And that has been, we decided we wanted to hang out, and life was getting in the way. And it gets really hard, even when you have a group text with all three of you in it, to have to schedule something every single week if you want to see each other that often. And so the standing plans were a way to be like, let's take all that complication out of it. It's a simple yes or no every week if we're going to do it. And it allows us to kind of guard that night for the other people. And that's a lot of commitment. A lot of people, that's not the rhythm that's going to work for you, but it's been really good for us. I think at one point in my life, I had standing plans with like 5 couples a week. So I only had like 2 free days a week, and people were like, you're insane. I'm like, well, it's a lot for some people, but that's really the way my life has thrived, and I've really enjoyed it. But, it could also just be like, hey, we want to hang out once a month. So every time we hang out, we'll plan the next hangout so we don't have to do it over the phone later or something. Just make it a date on the calendar. It's just being intentional about spending time with people that you really do want to see on that level of frequency, and just trying to kind of remove all the icky parts, the parts that, text messages don't get answered and somebody feels offended, or, things like that. Couples have a lot to deal with, and they have to talk to each other before they can get back to you sometimes. And that's just something that I think has really helped put them in a place where they can really take that time that they need, but also, not have to worry so much about it, because they can start to feel really guilty in ways that they don't need to as well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a different level of social kind of capital that they're able to spend. And that even differs amongst different single people, right? One of the things I love about the podcast is that we get to talk to different people with different personalities. But, kind of similar to you, I'll have people that look at me as though I'm this social butterfly. I'm actually not an extrovert. It's just my time at home is spent by myself.
Right.
So I'm not actually exhausting myself that much. So I have way more capital built up, not necessarily because my bank account is really huge, but because I don't spend it as often.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I also work from home all day. So yeah, it's kind of it's the carrot at the end of the stick, right? It's the reward at the end of the day for doing a hard job, is you get to go spend time with people later in the day.
Yeah.
And that's good. Right. But yeah, after doing all that for a while though, a couple of my friends started calling me a professional third wheel, kind of as a joke. And, and I think pretty much all that meant was I put the time in, and I'd communicated and proven that I actually wanted to be a part of their lives, and not someone who came in, to be entertained, or, come in for your stuff. You've got the Xbox, I want to come over there. That's not why I was there. I genuinely wanted to be a part of their life. And I got that moniker for like a decade or so. And after a while, the Lord just kind of put it on my heart, be like, hey, you work in podcasting. You've never done a podcast. This is what you have to offer right now. I don't hear a lot of this being talked about, but especially on the let's bring people together front. It's more of like let's talk about what singleness is like, or let's talk about what married life or raising kids is like, but never like, how can we remove these fears or these preconceived notions that keep us from hanging out and spending time together. And so I started a podcast last year called Observations of a Professional Third Wheel, because I like really long, convoluted names. And that's kind of where I'm putting my time these days, is trying to help single and married people be less afraid of spending that time together. And I try to speak from the singles perspective, being the single guy. And then I've got a really large group of married friends. I've been very blessed in that way. And so I kind of leverage that to have them represent the couple's point of view on each episode.
That's wonderful. And so if people wanted to check that out, the name of the podcast is what again?
Just Observations of a Professional Third Wheel.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I'm sure we could also find Unity in Christ somewhere on Spotify.
Actually, no. I do have some music under my name and a couple other names, but that band has been lost to time, sadly. So
Oh man. Okay. Well, you've told us some of the blessings and challenges in singleness. What have been some ways that your church community has been part of that story?
Yeah. So once again, I'm coming from a very fortunate point of view here. My church does a pretty good job collectively at treating singles and marrieds alike with dignity. I've been at my church for over 12 years now, which is blows some people's minds. We have a lot of new people. But the cool thing is I've been able to kind of see the change as we go from, a one pastor church to multiple pastors with actual staff and then kids ministries and all that. And, we have grown. I think we haven't always been as good as we are. I don't think we've been bad. Things get said every once in a while that are awkward or assumed that are awkward. But like, I feel like though, especially the team we've got now more than ever, our pastors are so intentional about not overlooking the singles community because we have a lot of young families. Like the kids are slowly outnumbering us as a church, and that is a tide we are constantly trying to hold back. But the singles don't get missed in all of that. They do what they can to make sure that they're seen and to bring them in. And you mentioned Pastor Sam Alberry, like having him around doesn't hurt either because he's very much got eyes for that. And so he kind of, if somebody in the meeting room is like, oh, we need to do this. He's like, oh, how are that going to make the single people feel? So it's kind of nice having that advocate there as well. Christ says that the church is a family, and that's what we're striving to be. We don't always do that perfectly, but we're trying to. And that does mean everybody is included and gets to interact with each other. And so for me personally, the way I felt this the most has been being in a diverse small group. Some people call them community groups or home groups, but we call them small groups. They're a perfect place for people in different life stages to come together and, just have community and pray together and confess sin and honor each other. And that's the coolest thing Christ gives us is the fact that if you have Christ in common, you literally have the excuse you need to get in front of somebody who isn't like you and slowly kind of stumble your way into a relationship, fill each other out. You've got the forgiveness and the relationship with Christ to make that happen. So small group has been just amazing. We've gone through some hard stuff together. We've gone through miscarriages, divorces, all of this. But we've got a pretty balanced group of single people and married people, and we've got a lot of kids. We had 5 kids last summer, so we're learning how to do that now. That's a new thing. But yeah, I devoted a whole episode of my podcast to that subject just because I believe in them so much. And I really believe you should try to get in a small group that is more not just a singles hangout or not just a married people's group together, but try to get into a group that's going to challenge you a little bit because that's the safest place I know to really do that on a closer intentional level.
Yeah, it sounds to me as I'm hearing you talk, and even as you share so many different examples from your singleness experience, so the local church really is kind of the epicenter of that
Yeah,
community. Right.
absolutely.
When Jesus talks in Mark 10 about receiving fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, 100-fold in this life, I'm really encouraged by hearing the way that your life seems to orbit around the community of the local
Hmm.
church,
Yeah.
and how so many of your friendships are kind of intertwined with that larger web of your local church doing ministry in the city of
Yeah,
Nashville.
I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through life, especially COVID and all that mess without the church. Honestly, like Christ has really given me that gift for stumbling along and attempting to live for Him. So
Yeah, I recently was teaching on singleness a little bit. I was trying to explain to people like the local church really does provide a place to be seen, a place to love others, and a place to be loved. And I just see that through everything that you're sharing right now.
yeah, like I said, we've been very fortunate. It's really sad when churches aren't that, and we can literally, churches can become not safe very fast. We see plenty of that in the media these days, but I do think it is worth looking and celebrating when churches do it well.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing your single mind story with us. As we start to wrap up, do you have any encouragement for our listeners as they pursue Christ in their own stories?
I'll try to distill a few down. For single people, one of the biggest things that I try to get across is don't let your sensitivity to the happy couples around you keep you from spending time with them. I have this thing I say we're all, single people. We all have like the dark nights of the soul, right? Where we look around at every happy couple sitting on the park bench and go, oh, I hate them so much. And I think, I don't think that's necessarily right, but I think it's understandable. And I at least have those a lot. But I have seen I've seen many people who are discontent in their singleness avoid couples because they feel like the marriage is being rubbed in their face. And I've never met a married couple who wants to make a single person feel like that. I've met a lot who are afraid of making single people feel that way, but nobody who ever really wanted to. And so a lot of times what I've had to kind of realize is the first thing I need to do is check my own heart, because not entering into that is literally costing myself so much love and fulfillment that I could have otherwise. And so I always want to ask people to check their own hearts before going into those situations. There may be nights you don't want to hang out with married people, and that's totally fine if you're just having a hard time, but don't let that stop you. It's not a great reason, and you're hurting yourself there. Especially, honestly, like I said, if you want to be married yourself, being around couples is a huge help. And if you want to have kids and all that, you'll learn very fast if you want to, if you spend enough time with people who have them. So that, and I also just want to encourage single people, don't assume that you have nothing to offer, because again, your flexibility and consistency are huge assets to sharing your life. And I found, honestly, a lot of my couple friends say it helps them helps keep them from melting into each other, because you can become hyper focused on your marriage and kind of lose your autonomy sometimes. And they tell me that seeing me and kind of the life I'm living on my own, bouncing around, seeing different people, all this stuff reminds them of what it was like when they were their own person, when they weren't married. And it's not that the marriage is bad, but you still should have your own identity in your marriage. It's unhealthy to melt into the other person. And it kind of helps people be like, oh yeah, I still have hobbies I love, and my spouse wants me to do those things. I should put a little time into that, and that will actually help our marriage. And so I've been told that's a good way that single people can help married people as well. For couples, don't assume that single people don't want to spend time with you. I think a lot of them really do, and they're just afraid or intimidated, or maybe they don't feel like they're bringing as much to the table, like I said. But yeah, I mean, I meet a lot of singles who don't feel like married people need them, because they still have this illusion that marriage completes you relationally, and that's just not true. So invite us in, even if it's chaotic. Again, like, assume that people aren't there to be entertained. Assume they just genuinely want to be around for the chaos. And if you sense otherwise, then you can have that conversation. But give us a chance to see what married life looks like without the rose-colored glasses, because it's beautiful and it's really hard. And I always tell people, you might just contribute to lowering the divorce rate a little bit by helping some single friends walk into marriage with their eyes open. So
That's so true. I mean, when I go over to someone's house, or if I have someone over at my house, the temptation is you make the place spotless, except for that one room that you keep locked, right, where you shoved all the garbage into. But you're not that way with family. When family comes over, you ask them to help with the dishes. You ask them to take out the garbage. You clean the floors, right? You
Yep.
care for one another.
Well, and
And
it's unsustainable when you've got kids, right? Like, there's always going to be stuff in the floor. And I think the moment I finally relaxed in one of my friendships was when I came over and there was stuff in the floor. And she's like, yeah, I was going to clean. And I was just like, oh, it's just Kevin. He's just coming over. I'm like, awesome. I love that.
that's so beautiful. I love that. And I think it's more precious and more God glorifying to do that. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your single-minded story with us. I'm sure that those that are listening are going to be encouraged in hearing how God has been at work in your life. I'm sure the people that listen to your podcast too will benefit a lot as they think about incorporating married lives and single lives in the life of the church. For our listeners, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave us a review on your podcast app. You could do that and tap the 5-star thing. I don't know how the internet works, but I hear it's helpful. So if you're willing to do that, that'd be super kind. If you're new to Single Minded, you can find out more about upcoming webinars and seminars, as well as all of our past conference recordings for free. That's right. You don't have to pay a dime. You could do it on the website at singleminded.community. And the reason why it's free is because as a ministry, Single Minded relies on the generous financial support of our community. So if you listen to the podcast and you benefited from it, or you've listened to the webinars and you agree with the mission of this ministry, we'd love if you'd consider giving and partnering with us financially. So if you're interested in that, you could go to singleminded.community/give. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Single Minded Stories. For more information about Single Minded, to access our resource library, or to partner with us financially, visit www.singleminded.community. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Thanks to Danny Treweek and John Lee, our co-hosts, Sarah Sarangallo, our podcast editor, and Aaron Talada, who created our theme music.